Manifest Destiny was a powerful and multifaceted ideology that propelled America's westward expansion in the 19th century. This concept held that it was the United States' divine mission and destiny to spread across the North American continent from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. This drive was fueled by several key impulses and underlying factors that shaped the movement's ambitions and fueled a sense of entitlement to these Western lands. The expansion of slavery was one of the central forces behind Manifest Destiny. As the U.S. acquired more territory, the contentious debate over the spread of slavery intensified between the North and the South. Southerners, seeking to protect and expand the institution of slavery, viewed westward expansion as essential to maintaining political influence in Congress by creating new slave states. The annexation of Texas in 1845, and later the Mexican Cession, raised immediate questions about whether these territories would permit slavery, escalating sectional tensions and contributing to the conflicts that would eventually lead to the Civil War. The push to expand slavery westward was thus intertwined with both economic and political motives, as Southern states sought to preserve the institution central to their economy and social hierarchy. An economic downturn in the early 1840s, especially following the Panic of 1837, further stimulated the westward movement. The financial crisis caused widespread unemployment, bankruptcies, and economic hardship in the East, motivating many Americans to seek new opportunities on the frontier. Westward expansion seemed to promise land ownership, economic prosperity, and freedom from the instability of Eastern markets. These opportunities were particularly appealing to young families and individuals seeking to establish themselves economically and to improve their quality of life, thus fueling migration waves towards the Western Territory. The availability of land and the opportunity for upward mobility was another powerful draw. The U.S. government played a major role in encouraging westward settlement through measures like the Homestead Act, which provided land to settlers willing to improve it. Such policies turned land ownership from a dream into a reality for many Americans who otherwise would have had few opportunities to own property. For some, the West represented a new start, an escape from poverty, economic stagnation, or restrictive social norms in the East. The open land and promises of freedom and opportunity offered by the frontier landscape drove waves of settlers into previously uncharted territory, setting the stage for the massive expansion that would transform the American landscape. Finally, acquisition of territories like Oregon and Texas were pivotal in advancing Manifest Destiny. The Oregon Trail became an emblem of American migration, carrying thousands of settlers westward into fertile land and a milder climate. The acquisition of Texas in 1845, following a successful rebellion against Mexico, brought the issue of slavery expansion to the forefront once more. Tensions over Texas eventually led to the Mexican-American War, which ended in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. This treaty ceded to the U.S. vast tracts of land, including present-day California, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. With these new lands came both the fulfillment of Manifest Destiny and a new set of political and moral conflicts, as Americans grappled with the expansion of slavery, the treatment of indigenous populations, and the integration of new territories into the Union. Together, these impulses behind Manifest Destiny, slavery, economic need, the promise of land, and territorial acquisition, propelled American expansion westward and solidified a national belief in a divinely sanctioned mission to settle the continent. However, the costs of this expansion, including conflicts with indigenous populations, escalating sectional tensions, and the moral dilemmas around slavery, underscored the complexities and contradictions within the Manifest Destiny ideology that would challenge the nation for decades to come. The Mexican-American War, spanning from 1846 to 1848, was fueled by a mix of territorial ambition, political developments, and regional tensions, all of which would shape its significant aftermath. At the heart of the conflict was the United States' drive for expansion and the belief in Manifest Destiny. This belief, strongly endorsed by President James K. Polk, set the stage for the war as it stoked new desires to acquire lands in the West. The election of 1844 was pivotal in leading to the war. James K. Polk, an ardent supporter of Manifest Destiny, won the presidency with a platform centered on expansion. His campaign slogan, 5440 or Fight, highlighted his intent to claim Oregon from the British control, but it also signaled an ambition to extend American borders further into Mexican-held territories like California. This expansionist drive became more than rhetoric when Polk entered office and as his administration aggressively pursued territorial acquisition. Territorial disputes also lay at the root of the conflict. Mexico had never formally recognized Texas as part of the United States, even after the 1845 U.S. annexation of Texas. This act alone strained U.S.-Mexico relations, with Mexico seeing it as an encroachment on its sovereignty. Moreover, the U.S. held ambitions to claim what is now New Mexico and California, regions Mexico firmly considered its own. When American and Mexican troops clashed along the Rio Grande in 1846, the incident provided Polk with the pretext to declare that Mexico had shed American blood on American soil, marking the beginning of open hostilities. The Mexican War consisted of several major military campaigns across diverse regions. In the Texas campaign, General Zachary Taylor's forces secured victories at Palo Alto and Riscada da Palma in 1846, solidifying American control in the contested region. The New Mexico and California campaigns saw swift victories as well, particularly through the Bear Flag Revolt in California, which led to the American acquisition of these territories. The Central Mexico campaign was marked by General Winfield Scott's advance, culminating in the capture of Mexico City in September of 1847. Scott's campaign demonstrated America's growing military strength and marked a decisive moment in the war, leading to Mexico's eventual capitulation. One of the domestic repercussions of the war was the Wilmot Proviso, introduced by Congressman David Wilmot of Pennsylvania. This proposed amendment sought to ban slavery in any territories acquired from Mexico. Although the proviso passed in the House, it stalled in the Senate and never became law. However, the mere introduction of the proviso intensified sectional tensions as it underscored the divisive issue of slavery's expansion and foreshadowed the fierce debates that would arise from the newly acquired territories. The war concluded with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed on February 2, 1848. This treaty had monumental consequences for both the U.S. and Mexico. In terms of territorial changes, Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the southern boundary of Texas and ceded an expansive region that would later comprise parts of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and sections of Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, and Oklahoma. In exchange, the U.S. agreed to compensate Mexico with $15 million, a sum that, while framed as compensation, underscored the profound loss Mexico experienced. The treaty also stipulated that Mexican citizens within the ceded territories could become U.S. citizens with guaranteed rights, including property protections, though in practice these promises were often inadequately enforced, leading to social and legal challenges for the Mexican-American population. The legacy of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo reverberated through American politics and society. The new territories intensified the national debate over slavery as northern and southern factions clashed over whether these regions would permit or prohibit slavery. The addition of new lands inflamed the divisive sectionalism that had long simmered in American politics, ultimately contributing to the tensions that would erupt into the Civil War. Thus, while the Mexican War achieved the United States' expansionist goals, it also set in motion the internal conflicts that would soon test the nation's unity and principles. The election of 1848 highlighted the divisive impact of slavery on American politics, sparking new party alignments and significant debates within existing ones. This election marked the beginning of intensified national conflict over slavery, particularly concerning its expansion into newly acquired Western territories. The Democratic Party nominated Lewis Cass, a seasoned senator from Michigan, as their candidate, advocating for the doctrine of popular sovereignty. This approach allowed settlers in each new territory to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery. Democrats promoted popular sovereignty as a middle ground solution, hoping it would calm tensions and avoid direct conflict. However, the doctrine left open the possibility of slavery's spread into new areas, and it proved unsatisfactory to both Northern abolitionists who wanted to restrict slavery and Southern pro-slavery factions who feared restrictions would limit their influence in new territories. The Whig Party selected General Zachary Taylor, a celebrated hero from the Mexican-American War, as their presidential nominee. Taylor was a slaveholder from Louisiana, yet he did not publicly take a firm position on the expansion of slavery. This ambiguity revealed deep divisions within the Whig Party, especially since Northern Whigs, known as conscience Whigs, were increasingly outspoken in their opposition to slavery's expansion. They worried Taylor's candidacy might serve Southern interests, but many supported him nonetheless, hoping his national popularity would secure a victory for the Whigs. The election also saw the emergence of the Free Soil Party, a new political group created in response to growing anti-slavery sentiment. The Free Soilers nominated former President Martin Van Buren as their candidate, with an unambiguous anti-slavery platform, to prevent the spread of slavery into the newly acquired Western territories. Their slogan, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men," resonated with Northerners who believed that free labor should dominate the West. The Free Soil Party drew support from Northern Democrats, conscience Whigs, and abolitionists who were frustrated with the major party's failure to firmly address slavery's expansion. The results of the election reflected the growing polarization over slavery. Zachary Taylor won the presidency, but the success of the Free Soil Party was a significant indicator of shifting political dynamics, especially in the North. By securing 10% of the popular vote, the Free Soil Party demonstrated a considerable demand for anti-slavery policies in new territories, marking the rise of a significant third-party movement. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party's reliance on popular sovereignty attempted to appease both sides, but it ultimately left many dissatisfied. In the aftermath, the election of 1848 foreshadowed future conflicts over the extension of slavery and the failure of compromise policies to reconcile North and South. This pivotal election highlighted the issue of slavery as an insurmountable barrier in national politics, setting the stage for the political crises of the 1850s and eventually the Civil War. The inability to resolve this contentious issue during the election revealed that slavery would remain a central and contentious theme in American politics for years to come. The Compromise of 1850 was an effort to address deepening sectional tensions over slavery's expansion, particularly following the territorial gains from the Mexican-American War. At the heart of the debate were issues tied to slavery's spread, state sovereignty, and federal authority. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 created a rapid influx of settlers to the region, pushing it towards statehood. However, California's application to enter the Union as a free state threatened to upset the delicate balance between free and slave states, intensifying the controversy over slavery's role in newly acquired territories. Another central issue to the debates was the territorial status of lands gained from Mexico. The South, eager to protect and expand its economic interests, pushed for the possibility of slavery in these territories, while Northern politicians and abolitionists opposed slavery's spread. This dispute brought into question who had the authority to decide on slavery, Congress or the residents of each new territory. The Fugitive Slave Law was also a flashpoint. Southerners demanded stricter enforcement of laws requiring the return of escaped slaves, but Northern opposition grew, especially among abolitionists, who saw federal involvement in capturing fugitive slaves as morally reprehensible and an overreach of Southern influence in Northern states. The Compromise of 1850, crafted primarily by Senator Henry Clay and refined with contributions from Stephen Douglas, consisted of 5 main provisions aimed at appeasing both the North and the South. First, California was admitted as a free state, preserving the balance between free and slave states. For the territories of New Mexico and Utah, the compromise introduced the concept of popular sovereignty, allowing local residents to decide on the issue of slavery themselves. This approach aimed to sidestep the intense debate by deferring it to the settlers, though it left open the potential for conflict within these territories. The compromise also addressed Texas's western boundary by establishing it in exchange for a $10 million payment to Texas, aimed at helping settle state debts. Additionally, the compromise aimed to soothe the northern concerns by abolishing the slave trade in Washington, D.C., while leaving slavery itself intact within the capital. The most contentious provision was the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which significantly strengthened previous laws by imposing harsh penalties on those aiding escaped slaves and compelling Northerners to assist in the return of runaway slaves. This aspect of the compromise aimed to protect Southern interests, but faced substantial resistance in the North. In response to the Fugitive Slave Act, several Northern states enacted personal liberty laws, which sought to protect the rights of free black residents and obstruct the capture of fugitive slaves, signaling increased resistance to federal mandates in Northern communities. The stricter fugitive laws also spurred the Underground Railroad, a network assisting runaway slaves, into more organized and widespread activity, as more abolitionists and sympathetic Northerners actively aided fugitive slaves in escaping to freedom, often to Canada. While the Compromise of 1850 temporarily reduced tensions, it failed to resolve the underlying dispute over slavery's expansion, merely postponing the inevitable conflict. Though it sought to balance interests, the Compromise underscored and deepened the sectional divide, setting the stage for more severe confrontations in the years that followed. Ultimately, the Compromise's failure to provide a lasting solution demonstrated the growing irreconcilability between North and South, foreshadowing the American Civil War that erupted just a decade later.